Hello, English learners. Welcome back to today's episode of our podcast. We're about to dive into one of the most fascinating and powerful topics, the science behind natural disasters. From the ground shaking beneath our feet to the skies turning into devastating hurricanes, nature's forces can be as mysterious as they are terrifying. But don't worry, we're here to break it all down for you, in a way that's both easy to understand and, of course, engaging.
That's right, Adam. Whether it's the eruption of a volcano, the deadly twist of a tornado, or the massive waves of a tsunami, nature's fury can strike at any time. But what causes these extreme events? And how do scientists predict and study them? Today, we'll explore the answers to these questions and more, while also helping you expand your English vocabulary.
You'll hear about the science behind earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, and more, with real-world examples that make these powerful phenomena come alive. Plus, we'll share some fascinating facts and survival stories that show how human resilience can withstand even the most intense disasters.
And, of course, we'll help you learn English through the vocabulary and terms that are essential to understanding these disasters. So, whether you're a science buff, an English learner, or just someone who's curious about the world, you're in the right place.
So, sit back, relax, and let's embark on this exciting journey to discover the forces that shape our planet and the incredible ways we can prepare for them. Let's get started. Recently, the ongoing fires in California remind us just how unpredictable and devastating natural disasters can be. The destruction caused by wildfires not only impacts the environment, but also human life and property.
Yes, Adam. These events really highlight the power of nature. It's incredible how fast fires can spread, and the damage they cause is often unimaginable. But they also show the importance of understanding and preparing for such disasters.
All right, let's kick things off by laying the groundwork. What exactly is a natural disaster? Most of us hear terms like earthquakes, hurricanes, or floods all the time, but do we really understand what makes them disasters? Essentially, natural disasters are extreme events caused by natural processes of the earth. But here's the key. It's not just about the event itself. It becomes a disaster when it causes significant damage to life, property, or the environment. So, an earthquake in the middle of the ocean that no one feels isn't a disaster. But the same earthquake in a city can bring chaos. Sophia, care to break it down further?
Absolutely, Adam. The term natural disaster actually covers a wide range of events. Think of it like an umbrella term that includes anything from earthquakes and hurricanes to landslides and even droughts. What's fascinating is that these disasters fall into different categories based on what causes them. For example, earthquakes and volcanoes are considered geological disasters because they originate from the Earth's crust. On the other hand, hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes are meteorological disasters because they're driven by weather and atmospheric conditions. Then there's hydrological disasters like tsunamis and droughts, which involve water, or the lack of it. And finally, you even have biological disasters like pandemics or locust infestations. Isn't that incredible how diverse these events are?
That's such a great point, Sophia. And I think it's worth noting that natural disasters aren't just random occurrences. They're closely tied to the environment and, increasingly, human activities. For example, deforestation can make landslides more likely, and climate change is making hurricanes more intense. The interplay between nature and human actions is something we'll keep coming back to throughout this episode. But before we get too deep, let's talk about why it's so important to understand these disasters in the first place. What do you think, Sophia?
Good question, Adam. I'd say understanding natural disasters is crucial for 3 reasons. First, it helps us prepare. Knowledge about how and why disasters occur can lead to better early warning systems and evacuation plans. For example, in Japan, Their earthquake-resistant infrastructure and advanced tsunami warnings save countless lives. Second, it helps us minimize damage. If we know which areas are prone to flooding or hurricanes, we can avoid building there or design structures that can withstand those conditions. And third, it's about recovery. After a disaster strikes, understanding its causes and impacts can help communities rebuild smarter and stronger. What about you, Adam? Why do you think it's important?
Those are excellent points, Sophia. I'd add one more: education. When people know the science behind natural disasters, they're less likely to fall for myths or panic unnecessarily. For example, many people still believe that standing in a doorway during an earthquake is safe, but research shows that's not true, or that tornadoes can't cross rivers, which is also false. When we replace fear with knowledge, we empower people to take practical, life-saving actions. And since this podcast is also about helping our listeners improve their English, let's sprinkle in some key vocabulary while we're at it. Sophia, what are some essential words our listeners should know?
Great idea! Let's start with the word hazard. A hazard is a potential threat, like a fault line that could cause an earthquake or a river that could overflow. Then there's the term vulnerability, which refers to how exposed or at risk a place or community is to a disaster. For instance, coastal cities are more vulnerable to hurricanes. And finally, the word resilience. That's the ability to recover quickly from a disaster. It's such a powerful concept because it reminds us that even after devastation, communities can rebuild and thrive again. How about we use these words in sentences to make them more relatable, Adam?
Absolutely. Here's one. The hazard posed by the active volcano was closely monitored by scientists. Or, the village's vulnerability to flooding increased after the trees along the riverbank were cut down. And finally, the town's resilience was remarkable as they rebuilt their homes just months after the hurricane. Listeners, feel free to practice these sentences at home. The more you use these words, the easier they'll become.
Exactly, Adam. And speaking of engagement, let's pose a quick question to our listeners. Can you think of a natural disaster that affected your country or region? What made it so impactful? Feel free to share your thoughts with us on our social media or email. We'd love to hear your stories.
That's a fantastic idea, Sophia. Hearing personal experiences not only makes this topic more relatable, but also shows how universal the impact of natural disasters can be. Let's jump into earthquakes, one of the most unpredictable and destructive forces of nature. I mean, think about it. You're sitting there, everything seems normal, and then suddenly, the ground beneath you starts to shake. It's terrifying and fascinating at the same time. But what exactly causes an earthquake? Most people know it has something to do with the Earth's crust, but I think it's worth unpacking the science a bit. Sophia, can you walk us through what happens when the Earth literally starts moving under our feet?
Of course, Adam. Earthquakes are essentially the Earth's way of releasing built-up energy. Imagine the Earth's crust as a giant jigsaw puzzle made up of pieces called tectonic plates. These plates are constantly moving, but they don't glide smoothly. They grind against each other and get stuck due to friction. Over time, pressure builds up at these stuck points. Eventually, the stress becomes too much, and the plates suddenly slip. This release of energy sends out seismic waves, which are what we feel as the ground shaking. The point deep underground where the plates slip is called the focus, and directly above it on the surface is the epicenter. That's where the shaking is usually the strongest.
That's such a clear explanation, Sophia. And what's crazy is how much variety there is in earthquakes. Some are so small you wouldn't even notice them, while others are massive, like the 9.1 magnitude earthquake that hit Japan in 2011. What's interesting to me is that these quakes don't happen randomly. They're more common in specific areas, like fault lines. One of the most famous is the San Andreas Fault in California, which is known for its strike-slip motion. Can you explain what that means, Sophia? And are there other types of fault movements we should know about?
Absolutely. Fault movements are essentially how tectonic plates interact with each other. The San Andreas Fault, as you mentioned, is a strike-slip fault, which means the plates move horizontally past each other. Think of two cars driving in opposite directions side by side. That's the motion. Then there's the normal fault, where the land on one side of the fault moves downward as the plates pull apart. Finally, you have reverse faults, where the land moves upward because the plates are pushing together. Each type of fault creates different kinds of earthquakes, and their movements can also determine how much damage they cause. It's fascinating to think about how these movements, invisible to us most of the time, shape the Earth's surface so dramatically.
It really is fascinating. And speaking of damage, let's talk about how scientists measure earthquakes. Most people have heard of the Richter scale, but I've read that there are other ways to measure quakes now. How do scientists actually determine how powerful an earthquake is, and what's the difference between magnitude and intensity?
That's a great question, Adam. So, the Richter scale is the one most people are familiar with, and it measures the magnitude of an earthquake, basically how much energy it releases. But for larger earthquakes, scientists often use the moment magnitude scale, which is a more accurate way to measure that energy. Then there's the modified Mercalli intensity scale, which looks at the effects of the earthquake, like how much shaking people felt and how much damage was caused. So, magnitude tells you the power of the earthquake, while intensity is about the experience and impact. For example, a high-magnitude earthquake in a remote area might not cause much damage, but a lower-magnitude quake in a city could have devastating effects.
That's such an important distinction. And speaking of impact, let's talk about what actually happens when an earthquake strikes. I've seen videos of buildings collapsing, roads splitting open, and people running in panic. But beyond the obvious destruction, what are some of the immediate and long-term effects of an earthquake?
Well, Adam, the immediate effects are the ones you just mentioned: the ground shaking, buildings collapsing, and sometimes fires breaking out due to broken gas lines. But there are also secondary effects, like landslides, tsunamis if the quake happens underwater, and even flooding if dams or levees are damaged. In the long term, earthquakes can have massive economic and social impacts. Cities may take years to rebuild, and survivors often deal with trauma and mental health challenges. The 2010 earthquake in Haiti is a tragic example. The country is still recovering from the devastation more than a decade later. But at the same time, earthquakes have also pushed us to innovate in incredible ways, especially when it comes to earthquake-resistant design.
That's true. Japan, for instance, is a leader in earthquake-resistant technology. They've developed buildings with shock absorbers and even floating foundations that can withstand massive quakes. And then there are early warning systems, which use seismic sensors to detect an earthquake before the shaking reaches populated areas. Those systems can give people a few precious seconds to take cover or stop trains and elevators, potentially saving thousands of lives. It's amazing how far we've come in understanding and preparing for earthquakes.
It really is. And speaking of preparation, I think it's important for everyone to know what to do during an earthquake. The basic advice is to drop, cover, and hold on. That means dropping to the ground, taking cover under something sturdy, and holding on until the shaking stops. It's also a good idea to have an emergency kit ready, especially if you live in an earthquake-prone area. This kit should include water, food, a flashlight, and a first aid kit. Simple steps like these can make a huge difference in staying safe.
Absolutely. Preparation is key. And before we wrap up this segment, let's look back at some of the most significant earthquakes in history. For example, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake didn't just cause massive destruction. It also changed the way cities approach urban planning and building codes. Then there's the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami, which had a magnitude of 9.1 and impacted several countries, killing over 200,000 people. These events remind us of the immense power of earthquakes and the importance of being prepared.
They really do. And for our listeners, here's some earthquake-related vocabulary to practice. Epicenter, which is the point on the Earth's surface directly above where the earthquake starts. Aftershock, which is a smaller quake that follows the main one. And seismic waves, the energy waves that cause the shaking. For example, the epicenter of the earthquake was near the city. Aftershocks can continue for days. Seismic waves were felt hundreds of miles away. Practice these sentences and they'll help you sound more natural when talking about earthquakes.
So, we've covered the ground-shaking force of earthquakes, but now let's talk about another type of natural disaster that's equally fascinating and terrifying: hurricanes. Sophia, I've heard hurricanes referred to as nature's heat engines. That sounds poetic, but what does it actually mean?
That's a great way to describe them, Adam. Hurricanes, or tropical cyclones as they're also called in some regions, are essentially massive storms fueled by heat. They form over warm ocean waters, usually when the surface temperature is at least 26 degrees Celsius or about 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm water evaporates and rises into the atmosphere, creating a low-pressure area. As more warm air rushes in to replace it, it creates a cycle. The Earth's rotation then causes this system to spin, and if the conditions are just right, the system intensifies into a hurricane. It's like a giant engine powered by heat and moisture from the ocean.
That's incredible. It's like the storm is alive, feeding off the ocean and growing stronger. But hurricanes don't just pop up out of nowhere, right? There's a process of development. Can you explain how a storm evolves into a full-blown hurricane?
Absolutely. It starts with a tropical disturbance, which is basically a cluster of thunderstorms over the ocean. If the conditions are favorable, warm water, low wind shear, and enough moisture, it can develop into a tropical depression. At this stage, the system begins to show organized circulation. When the sustained wind speeds reach 39 miles per hour, it becomes a tropical storm and is given a name. If the winds intensify further to 74 miles per hour or more, it officially becomes a hurricane. And within hurricanes, there are categories based on their wind speeds, from Category 1, which is the weakest, to Category 5, which can cause catastrophic damage.
So, naming hurricanes starts when they become tropical storms. I've always wondered how the names are chosen. It seems like they alternate between male and female names. Is there a specific system for this?
Yes, there's actually a very organized system for naming hurricanes. The World Meteorological Organization maintains a list of names that rotate every 6 years. They alternate between male and female names and are arranged alphabetically. If a hurricane is particularly deadly or costly, its name is retired out of respect for the people affected. For example, names like Katrina, Sandy, and Harvey have been retired because of the destruction they caused.
That makes sense. Some of these names carry so much weight because of the memories they bring back. Speaking of destruction, let's talk about the impact hurricanes have. When we think of hurricanes, we usually picture strong winds, but that's just one part of the story. What are the main dangers associated with hurricanes?
Great point, Adam. Hurricanes are multifaceted disasters. The strong winds can certainly cause widespread damage, tearing off roofs and toppling trees. But one of the biggest threats is storm surge. That's when the hurricane pushes a wall of water onto the shore, causing flooding in coastal areas. In fact, storm surge is often the deadliest aspect of a hurricane. Then there's the heavy rainfall, which can lead to inland flooding. And let's not forget the potential for tornadoes, which sometimes form within the hurricane itself. So even if you're far from the coast, hurricanes can still pose a significant threat.
Storm surge sounds terrifying. I've seen footage of water engulfing entire towns, and it's hard to imagine the sheer power behind it. Are there any historical examples of hurricanes where storm surge caused massive devastation?
Definitely. One of the most infamous examples is Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The storm surge caused catastrophic flooding in New Orleans, breaching levees and submerging much of the city. Another example is Hurricane Ike in 2008, which brought a massive storm surge to parts of Texas. Even relatively weaker hurricanes can cause devastating storm surges if they hit at the wrong time, like during high tide. That's why it's so important to pay attention to evacuation orders. Storm surge is nothing to mess with.
And it's not just the immediate destruction, is it? Hurricanes can have long-term effects on communities, economies, and ecosystems. After Katrina, for example, it took years for New Orleans to recover, and some areas were never the same. What about the environmental impact, Sophia? How do hurricanes affect the natural world?
Hurricanes can actually have a mix of positive and negative effects on the environment. On the negative side, they can destroy habitats, uproot trees, and cause oil spills or chemical leaks if industrial facilities are damaged. But hurricanes can also be beneficial in some ways. For example, they can bring much-needed rain to drought-stricken areas or help to redistribute nutrients in the ocean, which can support marine life. It's a reminder that nature is complex. Even disasters can have a role in the balance of ecosystems.
That's a fascinating perspective, Sophia. And speaking of balance, I think it's worth mentioning how technology is helping us predict and prepare for hurricanes. Forecasting has come a long way in recent decades, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Today, meteorologists use advanced satellite imagery, weather models, and data from Hurricane Hunter aircraft to predict a storm's path and intensity. These forecasts give people valuable time to prepare and evacuate if necessary. Early warning systems have saved countless lives. There are also innovations like storm surge maps, which show which areas are most at risk, and improved building codes that help structures withstand hurricane-force winds. Preparation is key, and technology has been a game changer.
Preparation really is everything. But it's also important to know what to do if you're caught in a hurricane. Sophia, what advice would you give to someone facing a hurricane threat?
First and foremost, listen to local authorities and follow evacuation orders if they're issued. If you're staying put, make sure you have an emergency kit with essentials like water, non-perishable food, flashlights, batteries, and a first aid kit. Secure your home by boarding up windows and bringing outdoor furniture inside. During the storm, stay in a safe room away from windows and don't venture outside until authorities say it's safe. And if you're in a flood-prone area, move to higher ground as soon as possible.
Solid advice, Sophia. Hurricanes are a force to be reckoned with, but with the right knowledge and preparation, we can minimize their impact. To our listeners, we hope this segment has given you a deeper understanding of these powerful storms. And now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a hurricane? What was it like? Share your stories with us on social media. We'd love to feature some in a future episode. Stick around, because after the break, we're diving into another natural phenomenon: tornadoes. All right, we've covered earthquakes and hurricanes, but now let's talk about something that really makes the Earth feel like it's alive: volcanoes. Volcanoes are the planet's explosive forces, and when they erupt, they remind us of the raw power that exists beneath the surface. Sophia, volcanoes seem to get a lot of attention because of their sudden eruptions and the devastation they cause. But what exactly makes a volcano erupt in the first place?
Great question, Adam. At the heart of a volcanic eruption is magma. That's molten rock that comes from deep within the Earth. The Earth's crust is made up of several tectonic plates, and sometimes these plates move in such a way that they allow magma to escape to the surface. There are different ways this can happen. One is when the plates pull apart, creating a gap through which magma can rise. The other is when one plate slides beneath another, a process called subduction, and the magma from deep within the Earth makes its way upward. When the pressure from the trapped magma becomes too much, it finds an escape route through cracks in the Earth's surface, resulting in a volcanic eruption.
It's incredible to think about how far down the magma starts. So when a volcano erupts, it's like the Earth is releasing built-up pressure from beneath the crust. But it's not just lava that comes out, is it? There are other materials involved in a volcanic eruption.
Exactly, Adam. While lava is the most famous product of a volcanic eruption, it's not the only one. Volcanoes can spew out ash, gas, and pyroclastic flows, which are fast-moving currents of hot gas and volcanic material. The ash clouds can travel thousands of miles, disrupting air travel and even affecting the climate by blocking sunlight. Gases like sulfur dioxide can also be released, and these can cause acid rain or even contribute to global cooling if enough of it makes it into the atmosphere. Pyroclastic flows are particularly dangerous because they can move at speeds of up to 450 miles per hour, and the temperature of these flows can exceed 1,000 degrees Celsius. They're fast, hot, and deadly.
That's terrifying. It's not just the lava that causes the destruction. It's the combination of ash, gas, and pyroclastic flows that makes a volcanic eruption so devastating. And speaking of destruction, when we think of volcanoes, we usually think of places like Mount Vesuvius or Mount St. Helens. Can you tell us a bit about some of the most famous volcanic eruptions in history and the damage they caused?
Absolutely. One of the most famous eruptions was the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. It destroyed the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. The eruption was so sudden and violent that people didn't have time to flee. Ash and pumice rained down, burying everything and preserving the cities for centuries. Fast forward to 1980, and Mount St. Helens in Washington state erupted in the United States. It was a catastrophic event that caused widespread destruction and loss of life. The eruption also created a massive crater and changed the surrounding landscape forever. And of course, there's the eruption of Mount Krakatoa in 1883, which not only devastated the nearby islands in Indonesia, but also caused a global temperature drop due to the ash cloud it released into the atmosphere. The sound of that eruption was so powerful that it was heard over 3,000 miles away.
These eruptions really highlight the immense power of volcanoes, but not all volcanic eruptions are as catastrophic. Some volcanoes erupt in more gentle ways, like those in Hawaii. Can you tell us about the different types of volcanic eruptions and how they vary?
Great point, Adam. Volcanic eruptions can range from explosive to effusive. Explosive eruptions, like the one at Mount Vesuvius, are characterized by the violent release of gas and ash. These eruptions happen when magma is thick and sticky, which traps gas and causes pressure to build up. When it finally escapes, it's explosive. On the other hand, effusive eruptions, like those in Hawaii, are much calmer. In these eruptions, the magma is much thinner and flows more easily, creating lava fountains and rivers of lava that gradually spread out rather than exploding violently. Both types of eruptions can be dangerous, but explosive eruptions tend to cause more immediate devastation.
So it really comes down to the type of magma. Thicker, stickier magma leads to explosions, and thinner magma leads to flowing lava. But no matter the type, volcanoes can have a huge impact on the environment. How do volcanic eruptions affect the environment, both in the short and long term?
Volcanic eruptions can have immediate and long-lasting environmental effects. In the short term, they can destroy ecosystems, burn forests, and release toxic gases that can harm plants, animals, and even people. The ash fallout can affect air quality, making it dangerous to breathe. But in the long term, volcanic eruptions can also contribute to soil fertility. The ash and minerals released by eruptions can enrich the soil, making it more fertile for farming. In fact, many of the world's most productive agricultural areas are located near volcanoes, thanks to this fertile soil. In some cases, volcanic eruptions can also create new land masses, like the islands formed by underwater volcanoes.
It's incredible how something so destructive can also create new life in the long run. And when we talk about volcanoes, we also need to mention the danger they pose to human life. Some of the world's most populated regions, like Indonesia, the Philippines, and parts of the Pacific Ring of Fire, are near active volcanoes. How can people in these areas prepare for a volcanic eruption?
Preparation is key, especially in areas that are prone to volcanic activity. The first step is understanding the signs of an impending eruption, which can include increased seismic activity, the release of gas, and changes in the shape of the volcano. Early warning systems can help evacuate people before an eruption, but in areas where evacuation may not be possible, it's important for families to have emergency plans and kits with essentials like food, water, and masks to protect against ash inhalation. Local authorities also play a huge role in evacuation and safety measures, so it's crucial to follow their guidance during an eruption.
That makes a lot of sense. Staying informed and having a plan can literally save lives. And of course, technology has come a long way in helping us monitor volcanoes and predict eruptions. What are some of the tools scientists use to track volcanic activity?
Volcanologists use a range of tools to monitor volcanoes, from seismographs that measure earthquakes to GPS devices that track the movement of the Earth's surface. Satellites can also detect changes in the shape of a volcano or measure the temperature of the lava. One of the most important tools is gas monitoring, which helps scientists detect changes in the gases being released by a volcano. These tools give scientists valuable information that can help predict an eruption and keep people safe.
Wow. So we're not entirely helpless when it comes to volcanoes. Science and technology are definitely on our side. As we wrap up this segment, let's leave our listeners with some key vocabulary. For example, magma, that's the molten rock beneath the Earth's surface, and lava, which is magma that reaches the surface. Then there's pyroclastic flow, the fast-moving current of hot gas and volcanic debris. For example, the lava flowed down the volcano's side. The pyroclastic flow destroyed everything in its path. Practice these words, and soon you'll be able to talk about volcanoes with confidence. Now that we've covered some of the most powerful forces of nature like earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanoes, it's time to turn our attention to another incredible and often devastating natural disaster: floods and tsunamis. Water is essential to life, but it can also be one of the most destructive forces on Earth. Sophia, let's start with floods. We hear about them all the time, but what exactly causes a flood?
Floods occur when there's an excess of water that overwhelms the land and the drainage systems. This can happen for a variety of reasons. Heavy rainfall is a common cause, especially when it happens over a short period of time. If the ground is already saturated, or if there are obstructions like debris blocking waterways, the water has nowhere to go, causing it to overflow. Floods can also be caused by rapid melting of snow, dam failures, or even coastal flooding during a storm. Essentially, a flood happens when the water exceeds the capacity of the land to absorb it or direct it away.
So it's not just about the amount of rain, it's also about the condition of the land and infrastructure. For example, urban areas with a lot of concrete can't absorb water as effectively as natural landscapes, right?
Exactly. In cities where there's more concrete and less greenery, the water doesn't get absorbed into the soil. This is called urban runoff. Water flows over the surface and ends up in storm drains, which can easily get overwhelmed. In rural areas, where the land might be more porous, water can soak into the ground more effectively, which helps reduce flooding. But heavy rain can still cause floods, even in areas where the land is typically able to absorb water.
That makes sense. And floods can vary in scale too, right? From flash floods that can occur in minutes to river floods that might take days to develop.
Yes, exactly. Flash floods are some of the most dangerous because they occur so quickly. They can happen within 6 hours of heavy rainfall, and sometimes in just a few minutes, especially if the rain falls on steep terrain or if a dam breaks. These types of floods don't give people much time to react. River floods, on the other hand, develop more slowly. As the river's water level rises due to rainfall or snowmelt, it gradually overflows its banks and floods the surrounding areas. While they give people more time to prepare, they can still be incredibly destructive.
And it's not just the water level rising, right? Floods can bring along debris, strong currents, and even cause landslides. The water might recede, but the damage left behind can be devastating.
Absolutely. Floods aren't just about the water. It's the destruction caused by the force of that water. When floods carry debris like trees, cars, and buildings, it can cause further destruction. In some cases, the water can erode soil and even lead to landslides, particularly in areas with steep terrain. Once the water recedes, it leaves behind a trail of damage. Homes and buildings destroyed, roads washed away, and in the worst cases, lives lost.
Such a powerful force. Now, moving on to tsunamis, they're often linked to earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. What exactly causes a tsunami, and how are they different from regular waves?
A tsunami is a series of large, powerful waves that are usually caused by underwater earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or landslides. When the Earth's tectonic plates shift beneath the ocean, they can displace a massive amount of water. This displacement creates a wave that travels across the ocean at incredible speeds, often as fast as a jet. Unlike regular waves, which are caused by wind, tsunami waves can travel across entire oceans and grow in size as they approach coastal areas.
That's fascinating. I've heard that tsunami waves can start off small in deep water but become gigantic when they hit the shore. Why does that happen?
Yes, that's one of the most interesting things about tsunamis. In deep water, tsunami waves can be barely noticeable. They might only be a few feet tall. But as the waves approach shallow coastal waters, the wave slows down and the energy is compressed. This causes the wave to build in height, sometimes reaching up to 100 feet or more. When these waves crash onto the shore, they can cause extreme damage and flooding, wiping out entire towns and villages.
It's incredible how a wave that starts so far out in the ocean can have such a massive impact when it reaches land. And we've all seen footage of tsunamis hitting coastal cities. It's always devastating. But how quickly can a tsunami reach the shore after an earthquake or eruption?
The speed of a tsunami depends on the depth of the water, but generally it can travel at speeds of over 500 miles per hour in deep ocean water. That's faster than most airplanes. So, if an earthquake occurs under the ocean, a tsunami can reach coastal areas within minutes. In some cases, like the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the first waves hit the shore within just 15 minutes after the earthquake. However, the larger waves often come later, sometimes hours after the initial shock.
15 minutes. That doesn't leave much time for warning or evacuation. And I've heard that sometimes before the big waves hit, the water can actually recede. Is that true?
Yes, that's a very important sign. Before a tsunami's main waves arrive, the water might suddenly pull back from the shore, exposing the seabed. This is called a drawback, and it's a natural warning sign that a tsunami is coming. However, many people don't recognize it as a warning, and that's why education and early warning systems are crucial in tsunami-prone areas. If you ever see the water receding in a coastal area, it's critical to move to higher ground immediately, as a tsunami could follow very soon.
That's such valuable information. So, with tsunamis, it's really about quick action. Let's talk about how scientists predict tsunamis. Unlike floods, which have some level of predictability, tsunamis can be much harder to anticipate, right?
That's correct. Tsunamis are harder to predict, especially when they're triggered by underwater earthquakes. However, we do have some advanced warning systems in place now. For example, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center monitors seismic activity and uses deep ocean tsunami detection buoys to track wave movements. When an earthquake occurs, these systems can quickly assess the likelihood of a tsunami and send out alerts to coastal regions. In places like Japan, which is regularly affected by tsunamis, there are very effective evacuation systems in place.
It's good to know that there are systems in place to help save lives. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the aftermath of floods and tsunamis. These disasters can cause long-term impacts on communities, economies, and ecosystems. How do they affect the environment in the long run?
Floods and tsunamis can have profound long-term environmental impacts. Floods, for example, can disrupt ecosystems by destroying habitats and introducing pollutants into the water supply. They can also cause long-term soil erosion, especially when floodwaters carry away the topsoil. Tsunamis can also damage coastal ecosystems, like mangrove forests, coral reefs, and wetlands. These environments are vital for many species of plants and animals. In the aftermath of a tsunami, it can take years or even decades for ecosystems to fully recover.
It's clear that the impact of water-based disasters stretches far beyond just the immediate damage. But with preparedness, technology, and better awareness, we can mitigate some of the devastating effects. As we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with some key vocabulary. For example, floodplain, the area that is prone to flooding, or tsunami warning system, which is the technology used to predict and alert people to tsunamis. All right, Sophia, we've covered earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, floods, and tsunamis, each showcasing the planet's incredible power. Now, let's talk about tornadoes, one of the most intense and unpredictable forces of nature. Tornadoes are often called nature's twisters because of their spiraling winds, and they can cause destruction on a massive scale. So, Sophia, what exactly is a tornado, and how does it form?
Great question, Adam. A tornado is a rapidly rotating column of air that extends from a thunderstorm cloud down to the ground. It forms when certain atmospheric conditions come together. First, you need a powerful thunderstorm, usually a supercell. Inside the storm, warm, moist air rises rapidly while cooler, dry air descends. This creates instability. If there's also strong wind shear, basically a change in wind direction or speed at different altitudes, it can cause the rising air to start spinning horizontally. Then, under the right conditions, this horizontal rotation tilts vertically, creating the spinning funnel cloud we recognize as a tornado.
That's fascinating. So it's all about the combination of rising warm air, descending cool air, and wind shear. But what causes a tornado to actually touch down? I've seen videos where the funnel cloud stays in the air and doesn't reach the ground.
Exactly. Not all funnel clouds turn into tornadoes. For a tornado to officially form, the spinning air must make contact with both the thunderstorm cloud above and the ground below. This connection often happens when there's enough energy in the atmosphere and the conditions are just right. Once the funnel touches the ground, the tornado is born. It can pick up debris, intensify, and move across the landscape, sometimes at terrifying speeds.
Speaking of speeds, tornadoes can vary a lot in strength, can't they? I know the enhanced Fujita scale is used to classify them, but how does that work?
Great point, Adam. The enhanced Fujita scale, or EF scale, rates tornadoes based on the damage they cause, not their wind speed directly. It ranges from EF0 to EF5. And EF0 is the weakest, with wind speeds of 65 to 85 miles per hour, causing minor damage like broken branches or damaged roofs. On the other hand, an EF5 tornado is catastrophic, with wind speeds over 200 miles per hour. These are the ones that completely level buildings, toss cars like toys, and leave behind total devastation.
It's incredible how much damage an EF5 tornado can do. I remember reading about the Joplin tornado in 2011, an EF5 that caused immense destruction and loss of life. Tornadoes like that really make you appreciate the power of nature. Are there certain areas that are more prone to tornadoes, or can they happen anywhere?
Tornadoes can technically happen anywhere, but they're most common in certain regions. In the United States, for example, there's a region known as Tornado Alley, which includes parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. This area experiences the perfect combination of warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico and cool, dry air from the Rockies, which creates the ideal conditions for tornado formation. Other parts of the world, like parts of Canada, Argentina, and Bangladesh, also experience tornadoes, though they tend to be less frequent or severe.
It's no wonder Tornado Alley gets so much attention. But what makes tornadoes so dangerous is how unpredictable they are. Sometimes you might only get a few minutes warning. What kind of warning systems are in place to help people prepare for tornadoes?
Tornado warnings have come a long way thanks to advancements in meteorology. In the US, for example, the National Weather Service issues tornado watches and warnings. A watch means conditions are favorable for tornadoes to form, while a warning means a tornado has been spotted or indicated on radar, and people in the area need to take cover immediately. Doppler radar plays a huge role in detecting rotation within a storm, giving forecasters the ability to warn communities. However, as you mentioned, the warning time can still be very short, sometimes only a few minutes, so having a plan in place is crucial.
Having a plan makes all the difference. And tornado safety is something everyone should be aware of, especially if you live in a high-risk area. Sophia, what should people do if they're caught in a tornado's path?
Safety is key, Adam. If you're indoors, the safest place to be is a basement or an interior room on the lowest floor of your home, like a bathroom or closet. Stay away from windows and cover yourself with a mattress or heavy blankets to protect against flying debris. If you're outside and can't get to shelter, try to find a low-lying area like a ditch and lie flat, covering your head with your hands. Avoid staying in cars or under overpasses, as these can become extremely dangerous during a tornado. The most important thing is to stay calm and act quickly.
That's excellent advice, Sophia. Tornadoes are terrifying, but preparation and quick action can save lives. Now let's talk about something that always amazes me, the aftermath of a tornado. What kind of challenges do communities face when recovering from a tornado?
After a tornado, the challenges can be immense. The immediate priority is always rescue and recovery, searching for survivors and providing medical assistance to those who are injured. Once the immediate danger has passed, the focus shifts to rebuilding. Tornadoes often destroy homes, schools, and businesses, leaving people displaced. Emotional trauma is also a major factor, as survivors cope with the loss of loved ones and the destruction of their communities. On top of that, restoring basic services like electricity, water, and communication can take weeks or even months, depending on the severity of the damage.
It's heartbreaking to think about the long road to recovery after a tornado, but it's also inspiring to see how communities come together to rebuild. Are there any technological advancements or strategies that have been developed to better protect people and property from tornadoes?
Yes, Adam. One advancement is the design of tornado-resistant buildings. For example, safe rooms and storm shelters are now being built to withstand even the strongest tornadoes. These are reinforced with concrete or steel and provide a secure place for people to take shelter. Additionally, advanced weather modeling and AI are being used to improve tornado prediction and warning systems, giving people more time to prepare. Education and drills are also key, Teaching people, especially children, what to do in a tornado can save lives.
Education really is so important. And on that note, let's give our listeners some vocabulary to help them talk about tornadoes. For example, funnel cloud refers to the rotating column of air before it touches the ground. Tornado watch means conditions are right for a tornado, while tornado warning means one is happening or imminent.
Great suggestions, Adam. And don't forget debris, which refers to the scattered remains of objects after a tornado. For example, the tornado left debris scattered across the entire town. Listeners, practice using these terms and let us know if you have any questions. And if you've ever experienced a tornado or have a story to share, reach out to us on social media. After the break, we'll be discussing another fascinating topic: lightning storms and their mysterious power.
Sophia, after exploring the raw power of natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, and tornadoes, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room: climate change. It's one of the most pressing global issues of our time, and it's directly tied to the increasing frequency and intensity of many natural disasters. But let's start at the basics. How exactly is climate change influencing natural disasters?
Adam, climate change isn't necessarily causing new types of disasters to happen, but it's amplifying the ones we're already familiar with. The Earth's atmosphere is warming due to greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, which trap heat. This warming disrupts weather patterns, making storms, droughts, and heat waves more intense. For example, warmer oceans provide more energy for hurricanes, making them stronger and wetter. Rising temperatures also lead to faster snowmelt and heavier rainfall, both of which increase the likelihood of flooding. Essentially, climate change is supercharging the natural processes behind these disasters.
That's a great way to put it: supercharging natural processes. And it's not just storms and floods, right? Droughts and wildfires are also becoming more severe. For example, the wildfires we've been hearing about in California this year have been devastating. How does climate change play into that?
Absolutely, Adam. Rising global temperatures dry out vegetation, making forests more prone to catching fire. Warmer conditions also extend fire seasons, so we're seeing wildfires burn earlier, longer, and across larger areas. Add to that the strong winds we've seen in regions like California, and you've got the perfect recipe for massive, uncontrollable fires. What's worse, once the fires start, they release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, contributing to the cycle of warming. It's a vicious feedback loop.
That's chilling, Sophia. And it's not just wildfires. I've read that rising sea levels caused by melting ice caps are putting coastal communities at risk too. Can you explain how that's connected to climate change and natural disasters like hurricanes and tsunamis?
Of course. Melting ice caps and glaciers are one of the most visible signs of climate change. As the ice melts, it adds more water to the oceans, causing sea levels to rise. Higher sea levels mean that storm surges, which happen during hurricanes, can push farther inland, causing more flooding and damage. Coastal erosion also becomes a bigger problem. In the case of tsunamis, higher sea levels can increase the area of land that gets flooded, amplifying the disaster's impact. Essentially, rising sea levels act as a multiplier for the devastation caused by these events.
It's like climate change is turning up the volume on every natural disaster. And it's not just about the physical destruction. There's also a human cost. Communities are being displaced, and entire ecosystems are being disrupted. How are people around the world adapting to these changes?
That's a crucial point, Adam. Adaptation is key. In some coastal areas, people are building seawalls or relocating entire communities to higher ground. In wildfire-prone regions, governments are implementing controlled burns to manage vegetation and reduce fuel for fires. Farmers are also adapting by switching to drought-resistant crops or changing irrigation practices. On a larger scale, cities are designing infrastructure that can handle more extreme weather, like flood-resistant buildings and better drainage systems. But adaptation alone isn't enough. We also need to address the root cause of the problem, reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
That's right. We can't just focus on reacting to the effects, we need to prevent them from getting worse. Sophia, what are some of the global efforts being made to combat climate change?
One of the most significant efforts is the Paris Agreement, a global pact where countries commit to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally 1.5 degrees. Many nations are transitioning to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydropower. Electric vehicles are becoming more common, and industries are looking at ways to cut their carbon footprints. On an individual level, people are adopting sustainable practices like reducing waste, conserving energy, and supporting eco-friendly businesses. It's a global effort, and everyone has a role to play.
Exactly, Sophia. Every small action counts, but we also need large-scale systemic change. But let's shift gears a little. There's a lot of debate about whether climate change is truly responsible for the rise in natural disasters. What do scientists say about this?
Scientists are very clear on this, Adam. Decades of research show a strong connection between climate change and the increasing severity of natural disasters. Studies have found that the number of extreme weather events has risen significantly over the past few decades, and the data consistently points to human-caused global warming as a key factor. While it's true that some disasters, like earthquakes, aren't directly influenced by climate change, many others, like hurricanes, floods, and heat waves, are undeniably linked.
So the science is solid. But Sophia, what about hope? With all these challenges, is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
There absolutely is, Adam. The same human ingenuity that created these challenges can also solve them. Innovations in renewable energy, advances in sustainable agriculture, and a growing global awareness are all reasons for optimism. Younger generations are leading the charge, demanding action and accountability. And the fact that we're having this conversation, raising awareness and educating people, is a step in the right direction. The key is to keep pushing for change, both at the individual and collective levels.
Well said, Sophia. Climate change is a huge challenge, but it's not an insurmountable one. As we wrap up this segment, let's leave our listeners with some key terms. For example, greenhouse gases, which are gases like carbon dioxide and methane that trap heat in the atmosphere, or carbon footprint, which measures how much carbon dioxide a person or activity adds to the environment.
Great terms, Adam. Let's also add renewable energy, which refers to energy sources like wind, solar, and hydro that don't deplete the Earth's resources. And listeners, we'd love to hear from you. What steps are you taking to combat climate change?
Share your thoughts with us on social media, and we might feature your ideas in a future episode. And that brings us to the end of today's fascinating journey through the world of natural disasters. From the earth-shaking fury of earthquakes to the silent creep of droughts and the electrifying power of lightning storms, we've explored how our planet's forces shape life as we know it.
It's been a powerful reminder, Adam, of both the beauty and the danger of nature. But it's also shown us how human actions, like understanding climate change, adopting better disaster preparedness strategies, and using innovative technologies, can make a difference. Natural disasters may be inevitable, but the way we respond to them is entirely in our hands.
Absolutely, Sophia. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today. We hope this episode not only informed you, but also inspired you to think about how we can coexist with nature more responsibly. Remember, the more we understand these phenomena, the better we can protect ourselves, our communities, and our planet.
And don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends and family, leave us a review, and follow our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or even your personal experiences with natural disasters.
We'll be back next day with another fascinating topic, so stay tuned. Until then, take care, stay safe, and always keep learning.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.